So let's get started. Let me just talk about the first thing. So before we get on to the schools, I just want you to understand a little bit about the eligibility aspect of it for the school that you're applying to. Say, for example, ISB has multiple programs. So one of them being the PGP, which is a 1-year full-time program. This program requires you to have minimum of 2 years experience. There is no end limit to it. We have had people with 15 years, 20 years also getting into schools like ISB, so that is great. Then there is something called early entry option. This is specifically for people with less than 2 years experience. So mostly they calculate their experience, they calculate your experience till March 31st, 2024. Right. So if you have less than 2 years of experience by March 31st, 2024, EEO might be an option, which is an early entry option that you could look at. Then there is a YLP, sorry, there is a typo here. Then there is a YLP, which is a Young Leadership Program, which is specifically for students who are studying, who can apply. And suppose they get an admit through this program, they join the program either 1.5 years or 2 years after they've had some kind of work experience. As we also have something called PGP Pro and PGP Max. This is specifically for people with senior executives. This is a part-time program, rather a blended program where you go and get to be at the campus also at specific intervals. At the same time, a lot of it is also delivered online. So this is specifically for working professionals if you are looking at not investing full time of your if you want to work in parallel along with studying, right? So that's something you can evaluate too. They also have a similar kind of essays that we'll be talking about today. Then there is IIMs, where Ahmedabad has a PGPX program, where on their website they have written less than minimum is 4 years experience. Again, pretty much IIM Ahmedabad, you'll see a lot of people with slightly higher experience. The average is slightly higher, 7-8 years is a kind of an average over there. However, the minimum that is stated over there is 4 years. Then Bangalore has the ePGP program. They have like a band that they have clearly mentioned, 5 years to 12 years. If you're slightly more than 12 years, or if you're more than 12 years, then maybe Bangalore might not be an option for you. If you're just around 12 years or something, based on the date that they've put in terms of their deadline date for their, for the experience that they calculate, you might want to write to IIM Bangalore with your profile to see if they are open to accept you to this particular program. IIM Calcutta has the executive MBA program where they say minimum 5 years of experience is required. And then Lucknow also has something called an program for management for executives, which is minimum 5 years, right? So all of these require you to take GMAT. Some also accept GRE scores. Also, most of them are looking at the current format of the GMAT. So I'm not sure whether they are really looking at the Focus Edition. Anyway, Focus Edition is not launched yet till end of August. But yeah, GMAT or GRE is something that, ISB definitely accepts GRE scores. If you want to look at IIMs, they mostly accept GMAT scores. So most people who are applying will be applying with GMAT scores. But otherwise, there might be some schools that accept GRE scores also, right? So that's a brief about the kind of schools we are going to talk about today. What we are also going to do is, in between, we'll talk about the various aspects of your application too, which will be important apart from talking about essays. So, make sure you might want to take notes or, understand what are the key things you would want to follow throughout the application process.
One of the things we see a lot is people asking us whether they want to apply for round 1, round 2 or round 3. And this is a very standard confusion that I think, not a confusion, standard question that a lot of people have when they come to us and they ask us about their application. Right off the top of the bat, before we discuss few of the things that I've mentioned here, I think I want to tell that at least between round 1 and round 2, there's absolutely no difference in terms of the acceptance rate, in terms of whether your chances increase or chances decrease. Typically, it's like a 40, 60, 40, 50, almost like a close to a 50-50 split in terms of round 1 and round 2. And of course, round 3 also comes into play. But I think I would say that if you're applying between round 1 and round 2, you're more or less okay in terms of your acceptance. Having said that, there are some things that change. For example, and we can look at a few of the things that are mentioned here. One of the things we look for is scholarships, right? So now, again, I think before that I have to say one more thing. Please apply when you feel you're ready, you feel you're confident. Do not get pushed because of a deadline. Think about it as this is the one time you want to do it. You want to do a great job at it. You want to be happy with your GMAT score. You want to be happy with your application. Only then apply. And if that happens to be round 1, great. If it happens to be round 2, great, right? So, but aim for round 1 or round 2, and you should be clear. Okay, so when you go to scholarships, ISB, for example, tends to give a lot more scholarships in the initial rounds. So round 1, from that perspective, in fact, like a few cases where they've almost given a few full ride. I think not a lot of cases, but a few full rides have happened only in round 1. And around 50, if I remember the statistics, around 50% of the scholarships go in round 1, and the rest gets split between the rounds. So that way, I think it makes sense to push in, try for a round 1, because we are close still on 15th of July and the deadlines are September 10th. So there is ample amount of time. Obviously, try for where you can get scholarship and make your best case. But again, put in when you feel you're ready. So scholarships matter. Sometimes even application fee matters. And again, this is not dependent. This is again dependent on school. Again, I will take ISB as an example. They are geared to make you apply to round 1. I think that's how their whole system, their strategy is based. Because I think for round 1, they charge 5,000 rupees, but for round 2 onwards, they add an additional 2,500 rupees for each application fee. So there's a little bit of a difference. Also, when you look at acceptance, due dates, yield rates, waitlist strategies, etc., all of that is determined again a bit on your rounds, because in round 1, sometimes they give you an acceptance of maybe 10 to 15 days. But in a round 2, they might just give you 10 days. And in a round 3, they might give you 5 days. And all of this is geared towards what your strategy is and what you're looking to do, which is more in terms of saying, you know what, I want to have enough time, because you're also applying to multiple schools, right? You're applying to an ISB, you're applying to an IIM, and some of you are even applying abroad. So you want to have a little bit of time for you to plan out in terms of, okay, I get an acceptance here, I'm waiting for a result from another school, which is probably my preference. And then I will then work out between the two, which is a more acceptable one for me. So you maybe need a little bit of time there. So for that, sometimes the acceptance due date comes into the picture, and that time sometimes round 1 is preferred. Similarly, when it goes to yield rate, so yield rates is essentially the amount of offers that go out from a business school and the amount that get accepted, right? So the more, like if 100 offers go in and let's say 80 of them get accepted, then the yield rate is very close to an 80%, right? So that is how they do this. And even here, what happens is, even in a closer round, in the round 1, the chances of acceptance, again, depending on the school, sometimes is lower, sometimes is higher. But what happens is, you get the time to make that decision, make that time in terms of, okay, I will look at round 1 as maybe my most focused school, my most focused attempt. And then at round 2, what happens is, not only does all the people applying to Indian schools come in, but there are also people who want to apply abroad as well. And it becomes a slightly crowded market, and everybody's looking at their one option in India to be their ISB or IIM, whichever is their preference, and then they're looking at schools abroad as well. So the wait list also determines based on that, because you don't know with wait list what is going to happen. You don't know how long they're going to take when you come back on a wait list. So you want to keep enough time for you to make that decision in terms of, okay, I just spoke to somebody in the morning today, and he was talking about the fact that he got an interview, like he got himself on the wait list, and it took close to a month for him to get that interview invite from ISB, and there was no real clear goal communication from them in terms of when the interview might roll out. And then when the interview rolled out, he had like 7 days to prepare for the interview. So if he had other schools in place, if he had other offers in place, and he wanted to make that decision on which one to take up, then it would put a spanner in his works, because he's waiting for the result from ISB, which remains his first preference school. So that's why for those considerations, maybe you want to do it a little earlier. But I think I want to close this whole slide by saying that, again, please apply when you feel you are ready. There is no rush in terms of round 1 and round 2. Be happy with your application. You only want to apply once in your life in an ideal situation.
Remember, the important thing is to get an admit. And you will get an admit if all aspects of your applications are perfect, right? If all aspects of your application are competitive enough for the schools that you're applying to. So don't worry too much about the deadline. Yes, you need to, more to keep the deadlines in mind. But at the same time, also strategize in such a way that maybe you want to apply to few schools in round one, few schools in round two, because when they send in their decisions, you also can plan whether there is a need to apply in the other schools or not, right? So that's a strategy that most of them use. Waitlist is not a reject. I want to add to what Sandeep also mentioned on the waitlist strategy. Waitlist is not a reject, which means they've liked you, but at the same time, they want to keep their decision on hold just to make sure that they are very confident of the people they are very confident about accept their the offers, right? So that's how the waitlist strategy works. There's strategies on what you need to write on the essay when you have waitlist strategies, especially when you're applying to schools abroad. That's also something that is maybe a separate topic for some other time, but today we're going to focus only on the application essays. So with that, let me just introduce myself. Hi, I'm Shreekala. I'm one of the co-founders of Crackverbal. I also am a mentor. I work with students who are applying to top schools across the world. In my prior life, I worked in technology. I worked for HP. Post entrepreneurship, or while through the last decade that I've been an entrepreneur, I've also been part of the Cherry Flare Foundation and the ISB Women Fellow program. As part of Crackverbal, we've also been part of one of the growth companies by Stanford. So it's part of the Stanford seed program too. So that's something a little bit about myself.
I manage the admissions consulting department here at Crackverbal. Some of you might have already spoken to me, and I look forward to speaking to the rest who would be interested and would want to be working with us a little later. But I manage the entire application process, whether it be for Indian schools or whether it be for schools abroad. Personally, from a personal level, I'm an MBA myself. I did it from HEC Paris, and I was fortunate enough to work across geographies and move, do the holy trinity of moving function, geography, as well as region. So I had the opportunity to do all of that, and I went from India to Europe, and then I worked in Southeast Asia, worked across different industries before actually, coming back to India and then being associated in this line, because I think this is, for example, a very high impact and a very high value role that I'm doing right now. So I'm very happy to be here. Prior to Crackverbal, I was also working with another company also in admissions consulting. So I'm bringing in a few years of experience myself.
There are various aspects of what is required in the process, right? And one of the main thing is planning, right? How do you plan this whole process? So more in terms of the whole planning process, right? Like I said, it's very important to figure out that first thing. And even if you're doing it on your own, please be sure of what are the ammo required for you to actually gear up and apply to a top school. I just want to highlight a few things that we focus on when we are working with students and the kind of mentors we bring in at Crackverbal. So one thing that we really believe in, that every mentor should have at least 2 to 3 years of post MBA experience. So this can be a parameter for you also to think about and choose. Why we believe this is important is, there are a lot of people who reach out to us who are MBAs themselves, and they've just graduated and they feel they are ready to mentor others. We feel that they need to have 2-3 years of experience after an MBA to actually get onto a mentorship role, because that industry experience is what actually adds value for somebody's career. And for us, it is not about application mentorship, it is about being a career mentor. So every mentor has to be someone who has at least 2 to 3 years experience post MBA, has worked with at least 20 plus profiles, like maybe yours, or at least the region or the school that you're looking at applying. And most importantly, has a very strong professional stake in your success. What I want you guys to avoid, and if you're looking at, say, individual people who are looking at helping, just make sure that, there are some students who have faced this before, where there is no skin in the game for them, right? Even if they fall ill or they go off somewhere, there is nothing that will happen to them because there is no brand associated with it, right? So, but for us, because it's a very important aspect, more from a student perspective and also from a brand perspective, that it's very important that we make sure that we have the right kind of success story for us. At the same time, we have the right kind of messaging that is required for us as a brand of what we believe in terms of being career mentors. Just a glimpse of a few mentors who are there at Crackverbal from all different kind of schools, from US to India to Canada to all kind of schools, right? So we have lots of mentors across the globe. All of them have a very strong mentor DNA, and which I believe is extremely important. We make sure that they are people who really want to give back to the community, right? So that's one aspect of the mentoring part. Now, next we come to the question of why are these schools even creating these essays, right? So many different kind of essays. Sandeep, what do you think? Why are they even creating these essays, and why are they making people go through 8 essays sometimes, or 3 essays sometimes, or one long SOP sometimes? Why do these schools even need this?
When I started my MBA application, Shri, great question. I felt the same way. I thought, oh my God, I just did the GMAT. I just finished everything. Now I have to start thinking about the essays again. And these are not simple like essays of who is your favorite leader you admire, right? It is more in terms of introspection and thinking about you and what sort of a person you are. So it just is a whole new ball game or a whole new restart of the entire application process. So I completely get what everybody must be going through, that they start thinking of, what do I do? Why do we even need these essays? So what I will say is at this point, what most of these business schools are doing is they have just looked at your resume, right? At this point, they want to know who you are, what sort of a person you are beyond your resume. Mainly because they are also evaluating to see how good you are, how good you will work in a class. And MBA is a class of, is a fit of class of misfits, right? That's how I would like to call it. More in terms of not that they're misfits, but more like they're from diverse profiles and diverse backgrounds. Now you might say on your resume that I achieved a great project, I solved a huge project, or I worked within the deadline, etc. But how do I know what sort of attribute or personality that is bringing about you, right? How do I know what kind of leadership aspects you bring in? How do I know how well you work within a team? How are you able to articulate in terms of are you a compassionate person? Do you have empathy? Because these are the things that one will be needed in your MBA, and two, much more importantly, will be needed in your career and in your life as you go forward. And everybody is doing MBAs to go higher up the ladder. So once you go more higher up the ladder, the more your technical skills will matter less. And it will matter more in terms of what sort of a person you are, how do you interact with people, and all your people skills and your intangible skills, as they call it, all of them come into the picture. And that way, without actually meeting you, for them to know is through these essays. And that's why they sometimes bring out all of these interesting things they want to ask, because please understand, they are trying to figure out who you are and what you are beyond your resume, right? And we had, I think this time even ISB, and we'll obviously be talking about that, but ISB has come up with very interesting prompts this year compared to last year. And we also have, and I know that a few of them also spoke about wanting to go abroad or not yet decided in terms of doing a mix of India and abroad. And the schools abroad have already been doing, always been doing this for a long time. And that's why we have this interesting essays. If I would pick a few, I'll say, like for example, Duke Fuqua, which is a top MBA school, always has this very interesting essay called "What are the top 25 things or 25 weird things or interesting things about you?" Right? And now you start thinking 25 interesting things. Really, what can I talk about? What do I do? But when you start thinking about it, you start realizing what sort of a personality you are, what sort of a thing you're interested in, and that starts coming up. And that's a great way for them to know, what, this guy is quirky as well. But he or she is also has a lot of attention to detail, loves gardening. And when you say I love gardening, it doesn't mean you just love gardening. It means that you are patient. It means that you're able to do a lot of things that gardening requires you to do, and you can easily use that skill somewhere else. So those are the things that they're getting. Cambridge, I think, has this thing about what advice would you like to give your 20-year-old self.
20-year-old.
Which I think is again very interesting thing, because it really makes you think in terms of, hey, I've lived my life. I'm maybe, 25, 26, depending on the years of experience you have, maybe 30, 35. But in those last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, if I could go back, that just makes you think a little bit about all your profile. Similarly, we have, I think, New York NYU had a thing about just representing 6 images or photographs about you and how they help and how they portray you. So very, very interesting thing. And I'm glad that, this time ISBs also sort of looked at it in that way only. And they are considering thinking about changing their whole setup.
I just want to add a little bit more from an IIM's perspective also, right? So especially, for example, if you look at IIM Ahmedabad's process, so the initial stage one that they do, and at least we are still waiting for the deadline dates, I think, from IIM Ahmedabad. But what they typically focus on is the first level is just about filling in some forms and answering very simple questions, which are like 100-character questions in the initial phase, where they are just looking at doing a filtration, and then they give you like 3 days to 1 week to actually write essays, which are 3 essays that they change every year. Sometimes it's very straightforward essays where they're talking about your goals. Sometimes they are trying to understand your depth of understanding of the kind of industry you are in. So there are different kind of essays they come up, and then we'll be talking about how IIMs also have an SOP part, and this is something that most IIMs also follow. Bangalore follows it, Calcutta follows it, even looking at Indore, Kozhikode kind of schools, IIMs, those also follow the SOP kind of a format. So we'll also talk about the structure of those things in a while. But more importantly, I wanted to talk about this aspect also, that this application process should not be looked at as just writing essays. It is a process in itself. It is a process that is gearing up for you to be able to effectively do your MBA also. Finally, justifying, what you, how you are going, what you're looking at articulating, right? So all these things are important, because if you map it to any role post MBA, right, this is what you will need to do. As a problem solver, you'll have to introspect, figure out what are the kind of challenges your process is facing, or your team is facing, or your company is facing, or your project is facing, whatever role you are in. And then you'll have to figure out that how do you actually articulate these very well, and then how do you actually put numbers and then focus on acting on it, right? So the process itself is something that actually gears you, or prepares you to do an MBA. So make sure that don't look at it as just a set of essays that you have to write. There is no shortcut to it. Rather, it's a very expensive shortcut if you're looking at taking a shortcut, right? Even if you're looking at Indian schools, it's 20 lakhs and above. Even if you're looking at IIMs, ISB charges 45 lakhs. If you're looking at abroad, it's going to be, more over and above 60 lakhs, right? And it can go up to crores, right? So don't do this very expensive shortcut. Make sure that you yourself know that, yes, I'm ready for it. And you have to go through this process to make sure you're ready for it, right? So that's something that I really want all of you serious people who are really looking at an MBA to understand and think about it.
I would look at it also from an essay perspective. I think it's a great way for you to know yourself. And why that is useful is because when you go to the MBA, again, things happen so quickly that you need to understand what is it that I'm actually interested in. Am I interested in marketing? Am I interested in operations? Am I interested in finance? Within finance, what am I interested in? Within consulting, what am I interested in? So the prioritization has to begin. And where does the prioritization begin? It's from you knowing yourself and what your interest is. Because everything, trust me, sounds interesting. Everything will be going on at its own pace. So you'll be thinking, you know what, I'm come here for a year, I want to make the most of it. But you make the most of it by actually focusing on what is something that is important for you. And that is what the application process will make you do. It will tell you what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what sort of a person you are, what do you like, what has been your motivation for your career, what do you want to do post an MBA, so what is your leadership experience. So all of these things will make you think and make you contribute faster. And tomorrow, even while choosing careers, I think it will be a great way for you to determine, okay, this is where I want to go, and definitely help you post your MBA way into your career as well.
So let's start with the first topic, which is ISB, right? And I'm going to just throw in the first question, the first essay question they have, which says, provide a honest portrayal of yourself, emphasizing your strengths and weaknesses. Let's look at this question here, okay? Honest portrayal of yourself. So first of all, they want us to be honest, right? So that's something that is very clear. It says emphasizing on your strengths and weakness. And remember, they've put in 400 words here. And this is something I want to tell, and this is a lot of people do this mistake. When it says 400 words, it is 400 words. Nothing less, nothing more. And when they have given you 400 words, make sure you utilize all the 400 words. It's extremely important. This is also one skill that they are looking at, because they want you to, they're seeing your articulation skills of how you can fit in your thoughts in 400 words. More than 400 words, never do it. It's absolutely no. So these application portals have softwares where they will cut off your application essay in 400 words, right? So if you write more than that, you look incomplete or half, right? So it's important that you use all 400 words. Look at it as a very expensive real estate over here, which means that you have to make sure that you kind of put everything that is really, really important. You'll have 1,000 things to talk about. You might have thousands of examples that you want to pick, but it is very, very important to pick the right example to actually portray your strengths and the weakness. Typically, a structure here would be maybe spend 100 words giving some context to who you are as a person, and we'll give you some examples. And then you talk about one example which is of a strength and one as a weakness. What I want all of you to start thinking now is the first aspect, which is introspect. When you say that your strength is being very analytical, think of all those instances in your life where you have portrayed this analytical skill. It could be personal example, it could be a professional example. There are people when they give personal examples, I remember there was this student who spoke about how he's very good at strategizing, and his personal example or strength was, and the example he gave was how he got married to someone who is of a different religion, and how he strategized his entire thought process of who he should reach out to first, and who he should convince first to get married, right? Personal examples too. Or if you're looking at professional examples, if you're talking about, say, emotional intelligence or adaptability as your strength, think of all those examples in where you, personal and professional, where you have showcased adaptability. It could be maybe working in a team which is extremely diverse, or it could be about moving from project to project, which requires a lot of learning, because every project is new and every challenge that you pick up is something that you have not worked on before. Being honest is a weakness, right? Now you look at the weakness aspect of it also. What are the instances that you have showcased this weakness of yours, right? So that is also something very important. So first aspect of it, introspect, and there are multiple story telling techniques and frameworks that are available. Something that maps to the introspection, the articulation, and third, the justifying part of it is also something called a STAR framework, which is situation, task, action, result, and then you talk about the takeaway, right? That is also something that you look at, right? So more from when you're looking at this question, it's not only about just stating that I am this, and this is how I think I am, but you also have to kind of map it to some story that you have gone through, or some example in your life, personal or professional, that depicts this strength or weakness of yours. Another aspect of it that I want to add, is that make sure that when you're looking at strengths and weakness, because it clearly says emphasizing on strength and weakness, and we have only 400 words. If you're taking, say, 100 to create a context about you, maybe you want to use the rest 300 words, 150, one on strength and one on the weakness aspect.
A great way, like articulation, obviously super important based on what your strengths is, and you want to think about examples that help you articulate it. But I will also look at it more in terms of going the opposite way also, which helps you introspect, which is going back on your career, going back in your personal life and seeing what was I super happy about, or where was I really unhappy in terms of what happened or what transpired. And how can, through that experience, can I think about something that I either handled well or did not handle well, and start seeing that as a great way to come up with your strengths and weakness. And that is what I wanted to get at. Of course, everybody already had answers when we asked them, which is great. But you also want to think about answers which are quote unquote sexy and quote which are not, like most everybody's looking for, versus what you actually are, right? So it always everything stems from being genuine and being yourself. And that is the point I just wanted to add, apart from everything else, obviously, that she mentioned.
Yeah. And remember, when you're writing your essays, one very important thing is that the person who's going to read it, or the admissions committee, whether they're applying to Indian schools or abroad, they are going to actually go through thousands of applications, right? They're going to go through thousands of essays. So there has to be something, it need not be Shakespeare in English. So don't think that an essay has to be, if you are not a person who's using Shakespeare in English, or if you are not a person whose language is like a, maybe as good as say a British person or something like that. If you are not that person, please, your simplicity and your language. So don't get bogged down to portraying yourself as somebody else. It has to be you. So simple English is great. Because all the person reading it should, it is more important for that person reading should understand. So don't think essays have to be very poetic or anything. Unless you are poetic yourself, it's okay. But if you're not, then please keep it very simple and something that can be easily read and understood by someone. And like you see in those Hindi movies, right? When they read a letter, some face comes out. That should be the kind of feeling they have. They should be able to understand you as a person when they are reading your essay, right? So that's the important. With that, let's look at some examples, right? How many applications filled every year? Many. Actually, they don't give us a real figure. Honestly, we speak to admission committees day in and day out, but it ranges between schools. Because there are some schools which have fewer seats, some schools have lot of seats. Like for example, if you're looking at IIMs, it's a smaller cohort. Sometimes it's even less than 100. Sometimes it's around 300 or something. But when you're looking at schools like ISB and 2 campuses and all, they are looking at 900 people. And what I last year, it could range in thousands. So it could be around 5,000, 6,000 people who are applying to these schools, right? So that's the kind of number that they have. When they are looking at the entire application part, right? So with that, let's look at an example, and this will give you an idea on how you could articulate. I'll just read out the first essay where the strength and weakness both is put. We will answer your question, obviously. Just give us a minute. I'll just read out the too many tabs here and blocking my text. Let me just read this, and you guys can read it too. Over the last decade, and this is a strength question, right? Let's go read through it. Over the last decade, my emotional intelligence has developed into a strength. My international exposure has catalyzed my intrapersonal skills. Through my venture, I built commercial relationships with the leadership of different consumer brands across the world. So one thing, he's talked about international exposure. Second, spoken about how this person has interacted with leadership people. And third, spoke about your own venture, right? So it's entrepreneurship also something. So in just 2 sentences, lot of messaging is already conveyed in this particular paragraph. Each relationship required sensitivity to culture and understanding of personality types. Building a rapport with the CEO of a skincare brand from Geneva with 50 years of family ownership was a different challenge. To establishing with a relationship with a female founder of a dental care startup out of Moscow, very clearly depicts this person's emotional intelligence. At the same time, this person has also put in a lot of other small bits of information that can be really that is telling me that this person is an entrepreneur. This person is talking to leadership. This person has international exposure. Put in things like Geneva and Moscow and teams in India and UK is also giving me a lot of information about this person's background and experience, right? So this is something that is clearly showcasing this person's leadership style and emotional intelligence, as this person has spoken about his strength. Look at the weakness aspect of it, right? I struggle with a tendency to let perfect be the enemy of good. While relaunching our e-commerce platform in 2020, my insistence in design perfection meant that we launched the store to a competitive environment during the pandemic. So again, store, competitive environment, it was pandemic, e-commerce, lot of challenges here. 3 months prior, we could have launched it into a comparative blue ocean kind of a thing, which is where you're looking at a completely unexplored kind of a market. This was a big learning moment for me, and I understand now that rolling out an MVP quickly and iterating as data comes in can be more often a sensible strategy. I found myself stressing the same lesson to other co-founders in my journey as an angel investor and advisor. So this person has spoken about, so it's not about just telling that, I'm a perfectionist, but also adding an example that how this was a problem for me, right? And this person has also looked at how this person has worked on this, right? You understood that this is a weakness that you have, but now you're also looking at, now when you're focusing on, giving your takeaways from this particular weakness to others, you're also telling other entrepreneurs and other founders that, hey, keep it agile. Don't wait for that perfect day to happen or the perfect product to be created, right? So this could be something which people talk as a weakness aspect.
Yeah, and I think
Any-
very clearly for both, I think the fact that they've mentioned exactly what their strength or their weakness is, and they've clearly had that structure of explaining what the weakness is, and in as many words in where that weakness or the strength was exhibited. And especially for a weakness perspective, I would say that Shri spoke about takeaways from there, but also and how that person worked on it. But also, as you can see, they very clearly said this was a big learning moment for me, and I understood now that rolling out an MVP quickly, etc., made a lot of sense. So it's a very one way to say talk about a weakness, but the other thing is to say that, hey, when somebody tells me about a weakness, or when I realize it's a weakness, I know tomorrow I can't just get up and that weakness can't be gone. I need to work on it, and it'll take me a while to get that weakness out. But here is how I've been trying to do it, and here is what I'm trying to work on, right? So if you've been trying to be a perfectionist all your life, tomorrow you just can't give up the reins to somebody else and delegate better and say, you know what, hey, you manage it. You would probably be a control freak, right? You will want to have control over everything that you're doing. But saying that, you know what, now I'm getting more people to come in and talk to me, I have more meetings, I delegate a little bit of the work to somebody else, and then slowly I'm giving up the reins one day to somebody else, and I have the confidence in person B or person C about managing the whole thing. That is a great way to paint it.
Make sure that you stick to the prompt. The question is not asking anything about ISB, or it is not asking anything about why you want to do an MBA or anything. It is just asking about your strengths and weakness. However, you might want to kind of map it to a professional strength or how it maps it to your work. But at the same time, there is no need to mention anything about ISB or why MBA or anything. It's just about you. They're just trying to know about you. So stick to the prompt aspect of it, which is also a very important thing.
With this person, again, we have obviously taken a snippet out of the entire essay that the person spoke about, but it's the same person talking about their strength as well as their weakness. So you can see in the first one, I'll just read it out and then we can go through the whole thing. So she says, I am a compassionate and empathetic person with excellent communication skills. These qualities have helped me develop close relationship with friends and family. One of my biggest strengths is my ability to adapt to new situations and environments quickly. I am open-minded and I enjoy learning about different cultures and perspectives. Now, this is, like I said, not the entire strength summation overall, but what it's saying is it's very clearly talking about what sort of a person she is, right? You already at the right of the bat, she's a compassionate and empathetic person. And how have they been instrumental in her life? Is she says, it has helped me develop close relationship with friends and family. Now, why is this? And she's able to adapt to new situations and environments quickly. Now, why is this a great strength to have? Again, going back to what I said before, the school is thinking, I'm going to put her in a very diverse environment of different people. There are going to be type A people. There are going to be a lot of people who are more passive. There are going to be people who will listen to you, who will have their own vision of how to do things, etc., different backgrounds. Then an empathetic and a compassionate person is able to adapt, or the fact that she's faced new situations and different environments quickly, that becomes a great selling point for her in terms of saying that, I'll be a great fit to your school. And ideally, and it's not that ideally, in the what has happened later is then she goes on to talk about giving examples of each thing, about why she's open-minded, where she has exhibited the fact that she enjoys learning different cultures and perspectives, and where excellent communication skills have come into the picture. So it's very similar to the previous one in a way, where the strengths have been mentioned, what are the points of the strength that have been mentioned, and then there is a next developing paragraph on this which talks about examples where the strengths have been exhibited. So that is if you're going back to our structure, and that is your articulation and your justification essentially of what your strengths is. Now, coming to the weakness, again, here she talks about she as someone who was taught to be self-sufficient and independent in life, which again is a strength, by the way, very cleverly put. She talks about being self-sufficient and being independent. I sometimes hesitate to ask for help until an issue becomes too overwhelming and difficult to handle. The weakness has left me feeling frustrated and overburdened on several occasions, both in my personal and professional life. I'm fully aware of this area of improvement, and I'm working towards overcoming it by reminding myself that discussing the areas where I face difficulty and seeking help from others will only make me more efficient and competent. Now, I think that is, again, first, very nicely done, very beautifully put, a little bit of a strength also in the weakness. I'm not saying follow this, but I'm just saying that this is a great way also to add a little bit of hidden strengths there. But she also says that, my genuine problem is I am not able to ask for help. And what happens because of that is it becomes too overwhelming and it becomes difficult to handle. And what that essentially does is that on several occasions, she says, I'm feeling overburdened, I'm feeling frustrated, and that has impacted both my personal and my professional life. So after saying this and after giving some examples of why this, how this thing has come into the picture and how this has affected the person, she then talks about the fact that, now I have realized it's a weakness. I have realized, I've been told, or I have come across it myself, or through some occasion, I know now that this is an area of improvement for me, and this is how I'm working towards it. A, I'm working towards it, and B, this is how I'm working towards it. And one day, in the midterm or in the longer term, I hope to get rid of the entire thing, weakness altogether, and use it maybe as a strength later on. So I think it's very neatly put, both from a strength and a weakness perspective, that identify, articulate exactly where you use that, and then finally say that this is what I'm going to be doing, this is what I'm going to be working on, why is a strength and why a weakness is a road for me to improve. So that's a great way of putting it.
One thing I would also like everyone to notice is the tone, right? So see, it's a very self-aware kind of a tone that is put over here, and that also is important. It's not always about it is very important that you pick the right example. And in fact, when I work, or when we as mentors work with candidates, it's not just one example that you have to pick, right? You might want to look at multiple examples to see which one actually resonates, or which is something that really has that impactful aspect of what you want to convey when you're looking at a strength and weakness, right? So make sure the tone is also something that is, when the words that you choose can actually change the entire meaning of who you are as a person, right? So say, even if you use that, things like, I avoided taking help from people, or I thought I was good, or something like that. It just the tone becomes a very important aspect too when you're looking at it. So if you see, this is a very simple way of putting it, and a very simple way of understanding what this person also is trying to say, which is also an extremely important aspect when you're looking at applying to these schools. Any questions so far? If you have, let me just pick a few questions which is very relevant to here before we get on to the next one. So we have 400 words, Abhijit, and when you say 400 words, when I say if you're looking at 100 words to talk about giving a context of who you are, and then talking about one strength or one weakness, honestly, you can write multiple if you want, if you have space to write. But at the same time, see, when you're adding a story to it, you might want to pick a little bit more, more emphasis on that one single strength that you have. You can pick 2 strengths or 2 weaknesses, but I feel you would not have enough space to, in those 300 words, to articulate 4 examples, and it'll just get too cluttered maybe. So if it would be great if you can just pick one solid weakness and one solid strength, right? So that could really help. Ranjit says, if you have to look at all top Indian schools, is it, can I just use one essay and use it everywhere? See, honestly, if the prompt is similar, if the same prompt, say for example, INSEAD uses a similar strength in essay question, yes, then you maybe can. Maybe the word limit is different. Sometimes the same question in some school will ask you to put 500 words. Some schools will ask you to articulate the same thing in 250 words, right? Whereas these people have asked you to put this in 400 words. So you might want to kind of change or put in some more structure to it, or put in some more data around it when you're looking at the number of words, also when you're looking at the essay. So it's okay to use the same example, because obviously no schools are comparing ke tumhare pe kya likha hai and mere pe kya likha hai. It's not like that. That will not matter at all. So, but yeah, it's important for you to make sure the word limit is important.
If you have multiple strengths that you are considering, and as Shri said, I think you have to pick one solid strength and one solid weakness to talk about it. But if you're looking at multiple schools and you have multiple strengths to consider, then maybe you can look at the schools and see what kind of value systems they talk about, and maybe you can see which strength of yours maps more closely to that value system. But this is only if you have those multiple strengths and you are able to, articulate really well on both of these strengths. Otherwise, always go with the one that you're more closer linked to and more you believe in. But if you have them, that's a great way to then split between the schools and see what exactly I need for each school, like an NCR and
which
ISB.
is absolutely true. Which is, say for example, if you're looking at some schools, right, they talk a lot. If you go to their website, they will talk a lot about how they like people who are creative and focus a lot on innovation. So maybe you want to pick strengths which depicts these aspects, right? So to answer the question over here, that what are the 5 most important qualities that these schools are looking for in potential candidates? So first is definitely the leadership skills, right? So that is definitely something that is like a hygiene factor when you're looking at doing an MBA. The second is having being a collaborative person. That also becomes important because a lot of these schools work on group studies. Like IIM Ahmedabad focuses a lot on group-based studies. ISB focuses a lot on group-based studies. So that becomes a very important thing. There are some schools that focus a lot on you being analytically very strong because their entire curriculum is structured based on case study-based approach, right? So their focus might be some little more on the analytical aspect of it. So again, you might want to change these and pick the right kind of strengths based on the kind of schools also you are applying to. And for that, researching on the school also becomes important, right? So it's not just about writing essays. You also want to look at the schools. Maybe when you talk to alums, you'll also get to know that, we are very high on community. We really like people who are very collaborative kind of a thing. So when you talk to them, you'll get this from them because that's what is something that they are being told as what is the culture of the school. So that's something that I think you need to focus on. Next is, let's look at the second question.
So I think the second prompt that ISB has basically asked is, again, it's a 400-word essay where they're asking you 2 distinct situations, distinct being an operative word here. One where you've experienced success and another where you faced failure. What I really enjoyed about seeing some of these responses is that, of course, there were a few getting a specific goal, and then there was some about happiness or something, right, which being satisfied in what you do, and that is exactly the point that I want to tell, which is that the success and failures both are very, very personal things. What is success for Shree is not success for Sandeep. What is failure for Sandeep is not the failure for Shree. So first, basically, always think about, again, introspection. Everything comes from that introspection perspective, understanding your strengths, understanding your weaknesses, and thinking about situations where you felt really happy and situations where you felt really low, and thinking about what they taught you and what sort of you came out from that situation. So do not worry about what is a right answer for this. It is very, very specific to what your goals. For somebody, it could be climbing to Mount Everest could be a great success, but for somebody who is struggling with a lot of fitness issues, running 5 kilometers one day near their house, I think that itself is a huge success. And sometimes it's even higher than somebody who's been trekking all their life and that person climbs Mount Everest. It's probably not as a big deal compared to you who've not been gone out. So I think that is what you need to do in terms of trying to differentiate. I think one thing that we get out of this prompt is you need to have very distinct situations. Please don't say, ideally, rather, there is no right answer, but ideally don't club both of them through one experience. Talk about a success separately and then talk about a failure separately. You can even split it accordingly within 50% word wise, right? Looking at 200 words each. In terms of how to answer, Shri, if you could just go to the next slide. I think we've already covered a lot of it in the first prompt where he spoke about the structure that we wanted to look, which is mostly like the introspect, articulate, and the justify structure. I think that is exactly what you have to stick to in terms of the success. And she mentioned is that there are so many multiple ways of talking about a few things in terms of structuring it, in terms of the framework. It could be the situation, task, action, result, and the takeaways format, or in terms of addressing everything like a story and talking about it from a story perspective. What the STAR format helps you do is structure your thoughts. So even if you don't really use that format, I think it's a great way to first write down your notes around it. Say, you know what, this was a success. This was a situation. I had to do XYZ things. So for which I had to, you know, reach out to 50 people and do this kind of a task perspective. And these are the specific actions I took. And finally, this is sort of the result that I achieved, right? So that is an exact way for you to do from a success standpoint. From a failure, what you'll have to do is, apart from all of this, I think one great thing for you to do is talk about the learnings, right? Again, failure. If you look at, everybody knows about the startup world right now. You know that startup founders who have failed are sometimes more in demand than startup founders who have succeeded, purely because they have learned so much on that journey that they are great value additions to somebody who's starting a business tomorrow. Saying, you know what, you say, I would do this, but somebody who's done the thing and failed, say, hey, don't do that, because, you know, this is what happens. And that is the insight, that is the learning that people get. So that is the thing that the business schools are looking for also, from this, to see how well you how well your successes have been, and how well you handle failure as well. And what you have learned out of it, right? So like I said, success and failure are super individual. Please be sure that you are doing it from what is success and failure for you. It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be a mix. There's no, as long as you feel, and I put you in a room tomorrow in an interview and I ask you, why did you talk about this? And I see that passion come out and you talk about the success or a failure. I think that's a great way to say, is this the right example to use or not? Of course, we'll go into examples later on, but that is something that you look to do. And if you can, I would say, you know, try and link your strengths and weaknesses to your success and failures. Now, it's not a mandatory thing. There's no recipe. There is no like, this will help you achieve, this is the right way to do it or anything like that. But it's a great way to show that, you know what, coming up with determination is my strength. I've always been, you know, worried, like I've been able to do a lot of these things. Here are examples for this. But one day I did this 5-kilometer marathon because I told myself that this is the year that I want to do it. And I started eating better. I started exercising better. And today I did it. So that's a huge success for me, which uses the strength of who you are, which was the determination, for example. So something like that is something that you can use for both your for your successes and your failures.
What you should avoid is using the same example. Make sure that you don't use the same examples. It can be the same focal point or the same thought that you're using more around saying, say, for example, if you're talking about you having emotional intelligence, right? And maybe there is another story which kind of talks about the emotional intelligence part of it, but do not use the same story. It has to be something different. It has to be something that, when you look at the prompt also, it clearly states contemplate, right? So make sure it's also talking about your takeaways of what you learned from that success and what you learned from that failure aspect also. So typically 400 words, ideally, one success, one failure, because it's talking about two distinct instances. And it clearly states two distinct instances, right? So maybe one success and one failure could be something. And make sure it is not contradicting also to anything that you have already spoken before. So say, for example, if you are talking about emotional intelligence as your strength, you don't want to put patience as your weakness. Then it contradicts, right? So that is something that you have to be careful about, of not contradicting your own point from the first essay to the second essay, right? So that could be something you could focus on. Again, think, when you say if failure is not looking at why you didn't get promotion, it has to be something you have to introspect. What was the reason? What was the competition? What you could have done better? There was some realization that you had that this didn't happen because you wanted to, or something didn't happen of how you envisioned it to be. Yeah. So that is also a very important thing that you have to focus on.
See, this is, at the end of it, this is a result, right? You didn't get promotion is a consequence of 50 different things. Maybe there weren't enough people. Maybe the management decided not to promote anybody. So you don't really know unless you explain the whole thing and you speak about why this not getting a promotion is something that is personal to you. Did you put in the required effort, or did you not put in the required effort? Did you not make the right connections? Were you not proactive, having conversations, etc.? It's always, when you look at the fact that didn't get promotion as your something that was in your control, then you can call it a failure and say, what are the things that helped? I feel I could have done better in order to get that promotion. And a lot way to start, and another ending point for that is, what did I learn from this, right? How did I come out of this mindset? right? Because I see before this somebody spoke about qualifying as a CA, and during which I was emotionally and physically low, and it's always then talking about things like how did that person overcome all of this, and how did he or she come out of the whole situation. That is definitely a way you face failure, or a way you face weakness and you come out, and that is always a very interesting thing to talk about for this essay.
Let's look at a few examples again. I'll just go through it. I'll read it again. Let me just adjust this chat window. The first strength and the second one is a weakness. Securing a partnership with Harrods solidified our commercial relationship with Cell, Cosmet, and Selman. It set a foundation for a thriving partnership over the next 7 years. We also established a reputation with the successful brand managers inside the store. It was a galvanizing achievement for our team in the coming years as we launched numerous other luxury brands. Again, focusing here, if you look at this content, there is some context that was added before this, but again, this is talking about the success of what this person felt it was a success for the team, more for yourself, or you saw a team succeed and you were so involved in it. And there's a good context also given to it, because they are talking about partnership with different kind of companies, and how it went over for a longer time, right? So that is also something that is spoken about. Let me look at the weakness aspect of it, and it's interesting to read this, right? I was keen to form a partnership with them. However, their terms were that we also invest in a Series A of a brand to secure a commercial relationship. They were raising at a $10 million valuation at the time. I declined the deal as it did not fit our pre-existing strategy. This proved to be a mistake. Not only did the brand become enormously commercially successful, it is also about to be acquired by Unilever for more than $1 million. Now, for this person, failure was more like a business failure, right? Some strategy that person had thought of really failed. So, this is a slightly larger professional failure for this person, but like Sandeep mentioned, it can be something that is very personal also that we can put in that.
But what I want to say is, remember, the people who are reading this are reading it holistically, right? So when you, for example, for this person who's talking about partnership with Harrods and all of those things, he has already set the context earlier of saying that he has great emotional intelligence and he's able to reach out to people and he set up partnerships. So it's at an individual level, he has already showed all the things that he has exhibited. And then he talks about being a great team person and then saying the success is for the team. And he's the big driver for that team success anyway. So the people who are reading it, you don't have to think about setting the whole context for them every single time. They already see and that's why be careful about not repeating things, because they're already seeing prompt 1, and then they're seeing prompt 2 holistically for both that matters for success, failure, both. Okay, so for this, again, we look at the success first, where the person talks about, so I threw myself into my work, from attending midnight machine failures to redesigning work processes, making them easier to operate. I gained a first-hand understanding of every aspect of my job. I also organized knowledge sharing sessions around the recurring problems in the plant, offering suggestions or solutions. Slowly, these experiences strengthened my team's trust in my technical and leadership abilities. The incident is my proudest achievement, as I not only proved to my team that leadership is not a gender-based trait, but also made my workplace more welcoming for women after me as well. So I think this is a very nice example. There is a little bit obviously missing because we've taken a snippet, but I still think that she's setting the context very beautifully. So she's talking about which again you got from the last line. Obviously, she's a woman operating in typically a male-dominated workspace, more like a shop floor, machine floor, manufacturing setup. And I think she talks about the fact that the trust was a big issue for her in terms of when she joined here, and the team did not have trust in her technical and leadership abilities, and because they maybe were not used to a woman coming into the plant. So how did she fight it? She fought this by attending whatever she mentions, right? She did midnight machine failure. She worked with them. She was there throughout. She didn't show them. She got rid of all the biases and stereotypes that they may have had about women by jumping into the work and doing everything completely. And as she basically participated as one of them, and that helped her gain that trust and that leadership ability. So it is not, as if I have to compare it to the previous one, or at a business level in terms of $1 million deals. And this is where the personal thing comes in, because for her, it was about earning her team's respect, her team's trust, And for her to, as she mentions very nicely in the last one, make it more welcoming for women after me as well. So she wanted to set a precedent saying that women can do this. We are as good as you guys, and we are able to achieve everything here. And so she, according to her, has been able to do that, and so that's why it's so personal for her, and she's able to say this is a great success for her. So it can be very, very personal. And we'll also go into weakness. So she talks about, when one of my colleagues left her job, I volunteered to temporarily take on the role of managing consumables inventory. Without prior experience in this area and a rushed handover process, I started experiencing difficulties in managing these consumables. Unfortunately, before I fully understood the process, we ran out of one of those critical consumable items. As soon as I realized the criticality of the issue, I informed my superior. Since the material was critical to the continuity of plant operations, he had to buy the material from another supplier at a much higher cost. I realized the situation could have been avoided if I had requested help earlier. Now, for all of those, I think who probably saw the similarity, I mean, I'll just reiterate. She had spoken about one of her weaknesses in a previous example, where she spoke about the fact that she hesitates to ask for help, and so she's taken that aspect of it, and this really helps when they look at it holistically. And she gave a completely different example there, but she's taken the same weakness, and she's put it into a situation where she shows us essentially how that weakness resulted in one of the failures of her life. And here she's, like you said, like we see, though she has used both professional settings, one is a more personal thing in terms of the strength that she has used, and in the weakness she has spoken a little bit more in terms of again personal, but I think also in terms of how it helped impacted the company as a whole in terms of maybe affecting its operations and its supply chain. But this is very beautifully put in terms of using that weakness and saying how that led to a failure, and that's essentially how you want to structure and articulate when you talk about these things also in your essays.
If you look at it, see, if you read this, you clearly understood what this business they are in, right? So what is also very important is not to use too many technical jargons, or don't assume that the person who's reading will understand everything. So say, for example, if you read, I clearly can understand, okay, this person is working in some operations, consumer kind of a sector where there is inventory and all that also to be managed, right? So if you see simple language without any technical terms or anything, we are able to even gauge that what is the kind of industry this person is working on and what is the kind of background this person is coming with, right? So that's also something very important. Again, years of experience and all that is not required, because somebody asked me how many years of experience. This is just one small example, and I'm sure all of you, even with 2 years experience, you will have some other example to provide, right? So whether it's 2 years or 20 years, doesn't matter. I'm sure you'll have multiple situations where you just have to think through and figure out that, oh, this was something that I felt, or this is something that I went through, or this is something that I experienced when I went through this entire process. The other thing that we want to emphasize is the power of having somebody else looking at it, looking at your essays. And this is something that we strongly focus on at Crackverbal. So it is not only that the mentor who works with you, but Sandeep and I also go through essays before you actually submit, just to make sure that it's all aligned, right? Because what happens is sometimes it's always, because you're working so closely with the mentor knows you in and out, your style, and sometimes it's always important to have somebody who does not know you or has not heard your story to look at your essay before you submit, so that it just looks very more, I would say, readable or consumable or understandable when it comes to writing your essay, right? But that doesn't mean you send it to 100 people, because then it will become a big khichdi. Too many cooks spoil the broth, kind of thing will happen, because everyone will have an opinion also. So stick to experts, stick to people who actually know what it takes when you're looking at applying to a B school. I just wanted to touch base a little bit on the methodology that we follow. So we start with the discovery phase, where you work with the mentor, then you go on to the storyboarding, and then focus on the submission and the important aspects of more like a deliverables aspects of it. But the discovery phase and the storyboard phase is the two top phases that you have to go through, and a very important part of the whole application process. Look at what the IIM prompt is about. Okay, let me just read, and I want your thoughts on what do you think is how you will like to frame this or put it on your application. So this is an SOP, and typically it says it's 500 words. It says your essay should include an objective and a clear statement on why you want to join the MBA program. What qualities and experience and achievements do you have to justify your admission? So if you look at it, there's already one strong statement of why you want to join this particular program. So a little bit about the program is important. What qualities and experience, so you can even think of the same strength and weaknesses strengths that you've picked up, right? More on the qualities and experience part and achievement. So maybe you want to, this is your second question. The third is, what type of jobs and what level do you expect after a successful completion of MBAX? Which is, they are trying to understand what are your short-term goals, what are your long-term goals, and they are also trying to see, it's a successful completion of MBA executive program, which also means they want to know that are you kind of mapping what you want to gain from this program also to what you want to do eventually, right? It cannot be something like you say you want to do something, but this program is not really good. That doesn't happen. It has to be something that maps very well to, you know, how you want to do it and, you know, how you want to go about it. Follow the same structure. Again, this doesn't mean that you have to answer the questions in order. You can start with the context of who you are, talk about your quality, experience, and achievements. This is more about why you for an MBA. So you can start with that. Then kind of the structure can flow on to why you want to do an MBA and why this program is important. Then talk about your short-term goals and long-term goals. Structure can be a flow based on how you feel makes sense for you. It need not be like answer 1, answer 2, answer 3 kind of a thing, more from a flow perspective. But as long as you have answered all aspects of these questions, it is important. So here you'll have to research on the school, try to understand how is that school going to give you the right kind of platform to get to where you want to go to. So that is something that is very important. You will have to talk to Allens, you'll have to network to understand what are the kind of things that really resonate with you and why you really like the school and why you really want to go to this program, and what qualities and experience, which is what background you come with in terms of the number of years and all that, how does that map to what you want to do eventually, right? So not all I mentioned, not all IIMs ask for SOP, some most to do, but like for example, IIM Ahmedabad will have a separate set of 3 questions that they have, which typically they release after the stage 1 is completed, right? So, but yeah, most IIMs will ask for at least IIMC and IIMB also have it. IIMB has other things also, like they have something called a writing test that you have to write impromptu when you go for the interview. IIM Ahmedabad has 3 levels when it comes to the interview aspect also. So there is an impromptu topic that is given to you and you get to talk on that. There is also, a case study kind of a thing. IIM Calcutta, I've heard, my students have gone through this and they talk about, they might ask you to do some guesstimation examples during the interview process. So it's kind of binded, not just the SOP part, but the interview part is also very binded to how they kind of assess what you're writing. One very important thing that you have to remember here is don't write anything that you have not done before. Right? Don't bluff here, because see, you also have to understand that these are people who read essays day in and day out. If you can't, if you're talking about something with a lot of passion and depth in your essays and you're not able to justify it in your interview, that can, it can be a really big deterrent to you getting an admit, right? And this has happened to people. Like, for example, I remember there was one person who had just written one small thing. So resume, your essays, your recommendations, everything is part of the process. And I remember one student who had spoken about how this person is very passionate about the folk music of a particular state. I think he picked, Bengal or something like that. And, to his bad luck, one of the interviewer was a Bengali and he absolutely knew a lot about this particular folk music. And it was just one question he asked, that what are the kind of instruments that are used in it, right? So when you are saying that you love this music and you're passionate about it, obviously you have to know what instrument, and he did not know about it, right? So make sure that you are bulletproofing every aspect of your application, whether it is resume, whether it is your essays, whatever you're writing on your essays, please be true to what you are. Don't try to portray yourself as somebody else. And that is extremely very, very important, because then again, like I said, application process equal to MBA, because if you're portraying yourself as somebody else, that person should do an MBA, not you, right? So that is something that is very, very important that you have to look at. Other thing that you have to focus on is on the recommenders. So when you pick the recommenders and you're talking about your strengths and weaknesses, especially when you're looking at, say, schools like ISB or NCED, also similar kind of questions that they are asking, make sure that the recommender is also talking about your strengths or giving some examples of your strengths which are similar to what you are trying to portray yourself as. And this is again something that I want you to be very, very, very off and very, very focused on this aspect, because you don't want to say something like, and again, this has happened to our student, right? He said, I'm a people's person. I am the person who's always initiating things and, creating clubs and, going for treks and gathering people. And I'm that kind of a person. And just one, with all the great things that the recommender wrote, he wrote just one thing, that he has to work on his interpersonal skills. Right. And that was a complete contradiction to what this person was talking about. And believe me, whatever you say are great things about yourself, the recommender also should say the great things, the same great things about you, or similar, or at least on the same lines. And you should not be on a completely tangent on, what is communicated to the admission committee. So that also becomes extremely important. So make sure, you focus on that aspect also.
Anything you're putting again on your resume, etc., it's open fodder, right? It's like you're saying that exactly what she said, like you talk about some folk music and you get trapped in that folk music problem, then it's a big red flag. Similarly, because I just talking and it just came to me, because everybody likes to put the word traveling right on their resume, because it's a very cool thing to add. You say traveling, and if I then ask you how many states have you been or how many countries have you been, and you don't have a specific answer to that, then again it becomes a big red flag. So anything you put on your resume, make sure that you are actually opening up yourself to questions. They have the right to ask anything that is on your resume, anything that is on your essay, anything that's on your SOP. So make sure that everything that you put is as genuine as possible. And that's why I put one of the big pitfalls as not being genuine. And when I say genuine, it's not about the right thing or the wrong thing. It's about being true to yourself, right? So you picking trekking as your favorite thing, but you're not coming across as a person who's ever trekked in their life. No, that doesn't work. You picking something that seems very interesting, but you actually not done it in your life, that doesn't work, right? So if somebody like I remember, because I do a lot of interviews also, right, as part of the panel, and I remember that I had somebody who said he loves English Premier League. And he spoke about that, and now unfortunately for him, I know a lot about English Premier League, and I asked him a lot about the tables, and I asked about who's winning and what is the transfer window and things like that, and I could easily see that this person is maybe just made up because it seemed very interesting. So I think that is something that you just need to think, and it also depends on, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, it depends. At the end of it, all the processes aside, you're talking to a person in an interview, so it really depends on what I like and what my mood is on that day. Right, so you just want to make sure that you're genuine. Okay, so the other thing that I would say is like copy pasting and retrofitting to a sample essay. Now we showed you a few sample essays. Now these are the essays that worked for that person because they were avoiding all of these pitfalls, but it's not because they had a sample essay to go to and I said sentence 1 write this, sentence 2 write this, sentence 3 write this. That will never work. And as Shri said, there is not even a particular order you need to write anything in. You can always move around the order as long as it is conveying what the prompt is asking. I think that's what you should look at. So read the prompt exactly, and like I said, holistically, see if it's saying introspect, if it is saying contemplate. These are very strong words which they have picked for a reason, and they're very, very clear, and a lot of them have really worked hard with the schools to come up with the right essay prompts. So they really see it as a affront if you've not taken into notice everything that they've mentioned. If they're asking you about your strengths and weakness, and I'm sure this is not, and nobody will do, but it's like as good as saying I'll just talk about my strengths and I will put half a line about the weakness, right? That is not how it will work. You have to then respect the prompt holistically and try to give everything that you can, give equal time and equal space to both of the things that they're asking for. Again, word limits, I think Shri already mentioned this, minimum and max. When I say minimum, nobody talks about a minimum word limit, but a 400 word essay, you cannot write 200 words or 100 words. It's just criminal. If you had so much of real estate to use and you just wasted it by putting 2-3 lines about it, because this is the only way apart from your resume where they get to know who you are. Are you worthy enough, honestly, to have a conversation with? Or have you piqued my interest enough as a business school to want to talk to you and understand a little bit about your profile? So you have to respect that and put in 400 words max, obviously. And if you're looking at 400 words as a max also, you can't, you say, I will write 500 words and I will cut it to 400 not in the logical way, right? You can't just say, no, this line is extra, so I will just cut it and it becomes 400. You have to make sure that the whole prompt is being respected, everything is being captured, and you are writing it in the proper way. So the word limit has to be respected. Not factoring enough time for revision and introspection. Everything, I repeat, stems from introspection. It's about understanding who you are. Even the previous one for the SOP, for the IIMs one we discussed, honestly, do you think it is anything different from it's asking you who you are? That is essentially what it is asking you, what sort of a person you are, ergo, what are your goals, what are your interests, how have you, shaped in your life, in your career, what has been the thought behind making all those decisions. That's what it is asking, and that comes from introspection. So you have to factor enough time. We have students, I was speaking to somebody who said that he started the preparation 3 months in advance because he realized that he needs 3 months to do a lot of these things, back and forth, talking to as many people as you can, because they give you a lot of opinion and viewpoints. So basically you must have enough time, and you can't just do it 3 days before the deadline and say I'll put in something, because that's like a recipe for disaster, right? You're saying that I'll put in something 3 days before and I'll try and do it. It's not a deadline, that meaning it's not like a cutoff, right? It's nothing like that in terms of it. It's just saying that you had so much time, you had so many multiple rounds, but you chose to send me something you do something within 3 days, and obviously things are not going to ideally work out, right? Because you have not just factored enough time for revisions, introspection, and conversations with multiple people, enough time for research on the school. And that's the last point that I was talking about. Talk to the right people. The right people could be a consultant, a professional consultant. The right people could be a right alum, a current student at a business school. It could be attending the admission events of most of these schools, physical events, researching, understanding why that school works for you, what are its values, what can I talk about in the essay that resonates with these schools, because these are the things that they are looking for. And when schools talk about values, it is very, very important and crucial to them. They really value those things. They want everybody to live those values. So they're looking for people who match those values sometimes of the business school. So again, everything essentially can come down to 2 or 3 points, but it is about giving enough time, introspecting, and doing enough research. And then making sure you use that time, that real estate you have, in the best way possible to put in the best application that you can do.
Perfect. So cool. With that, we are here for Q&A. I have 15 years of experience in IT. Does it make sense for me to join an IIM Executive MBA? Yes, why not? I mean, depends on what you want to do an MBA for. If you're looking at a full-time, you're open to invest a full-time. Because see, I always feel that one aspect of it is you have 15 years behind you, but you also have another 25 years ahead of you. I'm assuming you're going to work for at least till 60 or whatever it is, right? So you are looking at fixing or upskilling for those 25 years of your life. So look at it on what you are looking at gaining from an MBA. And also you might want to choose very specific MBA programs. But yes, it does make sense if that is aligning to what you want to do next, right? So it's absolutely possible that you apply to a full-time program if that works perfectly for you. There's one question which says, I've done a distance MBA and technically this will be my second MBA. So can that be a problem? Absolutely not. Again, I'm assuming that, your timeline between distance MBA and now is also there is some timeline. That is one aspect. But say, for example, if there are some people who talk about it and then talk about why they feel a full-time MBA should be something they are looking at doing. There are some people who do not, focus more on the aspect that a distance MBA did not give them that peer community network that they were looking for, right? So that could be something that you can talk about, but it's absolutely possible that you can do it. There's somebody who says, I'm preparing for YLP and my stage 2 will complete on 31st. I passed my stage 1, however, my stage 1 essay was not. They will not go and compare your stage 1 essay to stage 2. So don't worry about that. I'm pretty sure of this. I have spoken to ISB people. They will not pick your old stage 1 essay and see whether it is good or not, and look at your stage 2 is a separate process altogether. With your GMAT score, there's a separate set of essays and interview that you will have to go through. So you don't need to worry about that aspect, right? Can I include Coursera certification in the space of self-curricular? Yeah, of course you can. You can definitely talk about it. Is weekend executive MBA good if I'm not willing to do a job? Yes, it is definitely great. In fact, you should watch the recording of the last webinar we did where we spoke about the executive MBA programs. I think it will be up soon this week. Maybe you want to go through it, Saida. Just follow the Crackverbal YouTube channel. You will get more information about this. So it talks about how an executive MBA helps and how what are the kind of people who should be opting for an executive MBA. The other question over here is there an option to do an MBA from IIMs if we just have 2 years experience? For the top IIMs, if you see the minimum qualification is already stated over there, but maybe ISB could be an option that you could look at, right? Or maybe slightly other Indore, kind of MBA programs. IIM Indore, or there's IIM Shillong also. Or Kozhikode also, which has these 1 year MBA programs. You want to just go ahead and check out what is the minimum work experience required over there. Thank you so much, Idris. Really matters. I'm really thankful, grateful for you guys to attend, and thank you so much for appreciating too.